Waste time with Jesus. By mere definition, wasting our time isn't something we should cultivate. It seems contrary to the pressing calls for productivity and efficiency. We scroll through social media when we should be working. We play a game when we ought to be doing something productive. The more we waste our time, the less likely we are to earn our legacy, leave our mark, or make an impact. The world bombards us with messages declaring we are to be always on the go, always active, always producing. Sadly, this drive to constant movement can also be felt in our spiritual lives. We say things like, "Idle hands are the devil's playthings," or "God helps those who help themselves." These phrases, which do not occur in Scripture, make us believe that spiritual blessings are connected to the amount of work we do or the results we produce. It is but a veiled version of works-based righteousness, and it is disastrous for our spiritual livelihood. This is not how Jesus lived. Jesus often withdrew himself to lonely places, removing himself from the busyness of his ministry and the frenetic call of crowds. Despite the pressing needs that constantly surrounded him, Jesus often sought times to be alone in solitude and prayer. To put it another way, in a results-oriented world, Jesus wasted his time a lot. If we wish to live our lives under Jesus' example, we must also seek times when we step away from the frenzy of our lives so that we can waste our time with Jesus. Wasting our time in this way involves three components. 1. Embracing wasted places. Jesus was continually bombarded with people seeking miracles, healing, and teaching. At times, entire towns descended upon him, longing for his healing touch. At other times, the crowds would anticipate his future location and rush ahead to meet him. In his earthly life, Jesus could not escape the constant call to activity. Yet, Jesus knew that plugging into his life with the Father necessitated the need to unplug from the demands of the world. Thus, Jesus sought out the time and the space conducive to such prayerful attention. When it was morning, while it was still dark, Jesus withdrew to a solitary place. The word used for solitary place can also be translated as wasted place. It describes a place of no habitation, a place of complete solitude and silence. Jesus sought out a place devoid of activity and noise so he could attend to the Father's presence and voice. Behind all our faithful activity must be a desire to spend time alone with Jesus. We are to follow Jesus' example and seek out quiet, lonely, wasted places in our lives. Doing so does not take away from our call to ministry or witness, rather, it enhances it. Our time alone with Jesus directly impacts our ministry in the world. In his book, Out of Solitude, Henri Nouwen writes, "Somewhere we know that without silence, words lose their meaning, that without listening, speaking no longer heals, that without distance, closeness cannot occur. Somewhere we know that without a lonely place, our actions quickly become empty gestures. It is through the discipline of solitude that we grow in our capacity to feel his presence and learn how to identify his words out of the many noises of the world. Times of solitude, therefore, are necessary in our life with God. 2. Enjoying the fruit of solitude. Jesus didn't enter solitude simply to recharge his spiritual battery. Jesus sought out solitude and silence to receive instruction and direction regarding his messianic mission. This is clearly indicated in his conversation with Peter in Mark 1. After spending the morning in a lonely place, Jesus emerged with clarity as to the direction of his ministry. Amid the pressing demand of "everyone is looking for you," Jesus was sure he must go to the surrounding villages, for that is why I have come. Jesus often emerged out of his time in wasted places with a sense of clarity or direction. Such clarity brings about calmness and peace into our lives. Jesus was never frantic or worried. His times alone, in the unpopulated, wasted, solitary place, meant he stepped away from all that was frantic or harried, and was able to carry peace into the busyness of his ministry. Again, the account in Mark 1 is a wonderful example of this. In this account, we see an interesting contrast between the serenity and calmness of Jesus and the frenetic anxiousness of Peter. Mark records how Peter and his companions hunted aggressively for him. They run through the streets and alleys in a panic. All Peter could see was the demand for activity that was literally on their doorstep. Jesus had work to do, and any time not spent in such work was wasted time. Jesus, however, carries no franticness. He is calm and reserved, simply declaring the direction the Spirit leads him. Jesus can step away from the call of the crowd to further the will of the Father. As we live our Christian lives, we may face difficult decisions. Similarly, the weight of all our demands and tasks may weigh heavily on our shoulders. In the face of such things, times of solitude and silence are calming to us. They provide needed relief, direction, and strength. The more we spend time with Jesus in a focused time of prayerful attending, the greater degree of direction we have and the greater peace we hold as we navigate our life of faith. 3. Cultivating a regular habit. Jesus' time in solitude was not a one-time event. Jesus frequently sought out times of solitude. For example, Jesus spends time in solitude before he chooses the disciples. He seeks a lonely place after the disciples return from their first mission. He spends time praying alone following the feeding of the 5,000 and seeks time alone in Gethsemane. Through the course of his ministry, Jesus frequently engaged in times of solitude. We can easily fall into the temptation of busyness in our lives. We may tell ourselves that we don't have the time to cultivate solitude and silence. There is too much going on. We say, if I don't do this, no one else will. Everyone is counting on me. But is this true? After all, as much as we might laud our busyness, don't we all have time to scroll social media or watch our favorite program? Deep down, we all know that if we truly seek it, we all can find the time necessary to connect with Jesus. If you want to have a deeper faith, then waste your time with Jesus. Cultivate a habit where he is your focus, where you attend to his presence in silence and solitude. Doing so is easier than you might think. You might observe a time of silent prayer for 5 minutes in the morning, or you could spend time in silence at the end of the day. The great thing about these times of solitude is that we never have to manage it or master it. In these wasted places, away from the demand for productivity or efficiency, we simply allow Jesus to do his work in our lives. The more we engage in such time, the more we will find that our connection with Jesus doesn't just remain in those solitary moments, but remains with us constantly. How will you waste time with Jesus this week?